The Bobby O Show.
Welcome to the Bobby O Show. My name is Bob O. Potzner, and I'm here today with a very fine guest who's making, I think, her third appearance on my show. When I pick out the topics for my shows, I try to find topics that are new, that I don't know very much about, which some people would say I know nothing about anything. But I try to pick topics that I don't know that much about. And today I have Kelley Hopkins-Alvarez, who's a mental health professional, and is going to talk about some topics we'll get into about the impact on finances, on relationships, and the importance of communications. It's a new topic for me, and the thing I did before the show today that was a new thing for me. Do you know that there is a Pez museum in Connecticut? Now, some folks might say, what's Pez? Well, when I was a little kid, many years ago, it's a little candy that, I can't even describe it, but if you know what Pez is, go to a store and get it. But I took my 4-year-old grandson, my 18-month-old grandson, to the Pez Museum today. Didn't get to go in because one fell asleep and I had to stay in the car. But just for your attention, if you want fun with a child and fun for yourself, there's a Pez museum in Milford, Connecticut. Kelley, was that hot news for you?
It was incredible and fun. I could see them there. Wonderful.
Kelley, tell us about yourself.
I am a couples therapist and a licensed professional counselor. I'm in private practice in Ridgefield, Connecticut. I love what I do. My entire practice is specialized to working with couples.
How long have you been doing this?
Since 2010.
2010, so that'd be about 16 years more or less.
Yeah.
Did you work in a different profession before that?
In the field?
Or in any field?
Initially, I was in marketing. Then I got the bug to actually go back to school, and I became a certified teacher.
Did you?
Yes, I did, and in elementary education, and I loved it.
How many years did you do that?
Well, my story there is a little different. I went through the University of Bridgeport internship program.
My sister graduated from UB.
Wow. Well, they place you in a school and you do your classes for your master's at night. And while I was doing that, my entrepreneurial background kept kind of tapping me on the shoulder, and I started a business with my husband. I've been married for 34 years.
Mazel tov.
Thank you. And we wound up being in that business for about 10 years. At that point, we had our children, and it was time for me to actually do my life's work, which is to become a therapist. I've always liked therapy and been sort of just captivated by it.
You said something that a friend of mine who's been on my show 12 times, Michelle Phillips, who's an author and whatever, a very bright lady, and she said to me recently, I gotta say this right, when someone says, what's your purpose in life? She says, quote, your soul, S-O-L-E, purpose in life is to find your soul, S-O-U-L, purpose in life, unquote.
I love it.
Isn't that a great thing where,
Yeah.
you know, it's like that movie with Billy Crystal, when he was 30 years old going to this farm in Wyoming, and he asked this old guy, what's the key to life? And the guy says, one, and Billy Crystal says, one what? Find the one thing you enjoy in life and build your career around that.
Wow.
And you've obviously done that, right? You've actually, go on in your path.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the education really helped you in terms of being a teacher.
It actually has. Having a master's in counseling and a master's in education has been extremely important. The two of them work together, and my marketing degree from Fashion Institute of Technology way back when in the 90s. That's where I went and got my undergrad. All of those experiences are with me in the therapy room today.
I always tell young people, and they say, well, what should I do to become a lawyer? And I'll say everything you do in your life helps you become a lawyer or any profession you have, because you're always building a resume. But when you mentioned marketing, when I went to Duke Law School, no one told me that no matter whether you go to the biggest firm in the world or one-person shop or whatever kind of firm you go to, you're always marketing. And it's not like you're out there selling yourself, but you're selling yourself because every case, if you do a good job, others learn who you are. And the same thing applies in your firm.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. We're always marketing ourselves. In therapy, we're being our authentic selves. But as I'm preparing for my clients and trying to search which clients I will be able to serve in the best way, that's when we're also kind of using some of those marketing skills. And it's fun. Some of it's fun.
And you and I have the luxury of being able to say yes and no to clients. In other words, there's some clients where every lawyer isn't the right lawyer for a certain client and vice versa.
Yes.
And you have the ability to say no. When I first met you, I learned about your being a discernment counselor.
Yes.
Just very briefly as an entree to what we're talking about today, what does that mean, discernment counselor?
Yes, well,
therapist, actually.
When you think about a couple that's in a difficult place, the one way I can describe it is someone is leaning into the marriage and someone is leaning out of the marriage. You can't do therapy in that situation. You can do couples therapy if both people want to actually work on those issues. When someone either has felt like they've had therapy and it hasn't worked, or the time for therapy for them either has passed or they're not willing to do it, what can we do with a couple like that? Dr. Bill Doherty started a wonderful short-term intensive program called Discernment Counseling, where we're helping the couple explore very carefully and also slowing anyone down from any impatient, let's say adversarial type of energy, to think about what path would be the right path for them. And we put them through a course and a protocol of care to help facilitate them getting guidance on how to figure out what is the right steps for them.
You know, your physical health is very important. If I break my arm, I'll go to an orthopod to get my arm checked out. But your mental health is as important as physical. But sometimes too many people, I think, even nowadays, even in the 2020s now, people still, should I go see a therapist or not? And I have had on my show many people, including you, who are excellent therapists in very different aspects of therapy. And today we're going to talk about an aspect that you brought to my attention, and that is that you are not a financial planner. And there's a practice of law for divorces called collaborative divorce, which we're not going to get into today, but sometimes you bring different experts, including a financial planner, to these sessions, but you also might bring a mental health professional. And you suggested to me a topic today we should talk about, which we are going to talk about, is that there are certain financial aspects of a relationship that people need to talk about. Communications is always the theme, but we're going to talk about the financial aspects of a relationship, whether it be husband-wife, living together, a business person, whatever, to talk about understanding and communicating about finances. I want to read this little blurb that I will set up. This is a good setup. Put my glass on so I can read it.
Great.
And this is from you. Quote, when I think about the couples in our community, one of the most common challenges I see as a couples therapist involves money. What's interesting is that these conversations aren't limited to couples who are struggling financially, which is what I thought when you first mentioned the topic. I see them in couples who have very little, those who are middle income, and those who are financially very successful. What's the common thread, you might ask? And you said, quote, the common thread isn't the amount of money they have, it's the amount of connection they have around money. Many couples never learn how to have open, honest, and ongoing conversations about finances. Instead, they fall into patterns of misunderstanding, assumptions, or conflict. I have more I want to read, but I'll wait till you have a chance to talk about things. But just as an opening salvo, because we're going to get to this in great levels of granularity, just tell me generally, what did I just read? What's that all about, generally speaking?
First of all, thank you in keeping that email and capturing it. You do that. You find little threads and you build your file. So you have your file there, and I love it.
And you can see this orange one right here has your name on it.
I love it.
And I went back to the one from the prior show, too.
So that work that you did, thank you for helping to focus on something that I'm really passionate about. Couples struggle with different levels of communication. As we were prepping for the show, you mentioned a few times communication. And there's different patterns of negative communication and cycles that couples go through. And the one that we as therapists probably are trained the least in is the emotions and behaviors around money. You can talk to a lot of therapists. I know none of my peers have a connection to this. In early June, I did a part 1 and a part 2 training for the Connecticut Counseling Association on this topic. Part 1 was money in the therapy room, how we as providers feel about money. a lot of the research I looked at, and there isn't a lot, points to us as therapists as struggling with the idea and the concepts around money. Part 2 was discussing cases, specific sort of hypothetical cases. One was individual therapy, one was couples therapy, one was adolescent therapy, for my peers, to try to get a sense of what are some of the dynamics that in cases that we see. We might just quickly brush over the financial piece. We might not realize there's emotion and behaviors that, from a therapeutic standpoint, we could talk about it. We don't need to see spreadsheets. We don't do any math. As a field, I know I personally have never been to a training that talked about different concepts of cases and when they brought up money. So I'm on the bandwagon, so to speak, about this in different aspects and phases of my career, my interest levels and things that I see showing up in cases. I'm basically following when my couples come in, and prior to working with couples, I worked with individual clients as well, and narrowed my practice in 2023 exclusively to couples. This has always been there. And so what I'm doing is I'm following different aspects that show up as common patterns. And that's why we're here today.
You know, it's interesting because I occasionally do premarital agreements, and I think people, my perspective is a premarital agreement, which is an agreement that's put in place before you get married, isn't necessary in many cases. I think sometimes I'll discourage people from doing a premarital agreement, but some want to do it. But in those cases, there's discussion because there has to be 2 lawyers involved. The statute talks about why there should be, et cetera. And people have a conversation. But the vast majority of cases, people don't discuss those kinds of things. And I would venture to say that you find this, hopefully I think I'm accurate, if not you'll correct me, people will discuss where they want to live before you get married. They'll talk about, do you want to have kids or not have kids? How are we going to raise them if you're different faiths? But I would venture to say that many times people don't talk about how are we going to handle my paycheck when it comes in? How are we going to handle who's paying the mortgage or the rent? Do you mind if I spend $80 for a bottle of wine versus $10 for a bottle of wine? Those kind of discussions, do you find in your activities as a therapist that too few cases or people who are going to get married or live together with someone work out those issues on finances ahead of time?
Very few. And I really wish I could be a little fly on the wall as you were doing those premarital agreements. I have a lot of curiosity regarding that. I find that people operate in extremes in this case with money. Either someone is kind of coming from a place of scarcity and they're checking every cent, regardless of income level. The bulk are on the other end, where if there's enough to pay the bills for the month, they're good. And until retirement comes, or excuse me, let me roll back, until it's college time and then eventually retirement, there are all these gaps. And you know what? We're not blaming couples. This presentation is, although we're mentioning couples, this pertains to individuals. Before the show, we were talking about people who are starting a business together who may have not sat down and really discussed the emotions and behaviors around money. What are each of their histories around money? We'll talk a little bit later about the influence from family of origin and money. So this topic, I'm excited that you wanted to talk about it today because we don't do enough work around it as therapists, people in relationships, and I'd say people in the world.
Whenever I have a divorce consultation, over the course of the many years I've done divorce work, it's actually called dissolution of marriage, divorce work, I have a yellow sheet. And you have not been in my office for this kind of thing, so your husband, don't be nervous. It's a yellow 4-page sheet, which nowadays probably with AI and everything else, people don't have yellow sheets in form.
No.
But I always ask the question, and by the way, in high school I learned from a professor, every week we had a teacher would say the phrase for the week. And his phrase one time was, Mr. Shuren, a change is not always a change for the better. A change is not, and I heard today about AI, there's a scandal now where a lot of renters are getting hurt because there's a perspective of, here's a lease for a piece of property, you pay a down payment, and it turns out the property never existed. So the point about a change is always a change for the better, so I still have my yellow sheet. But what's the point of the yellow sheet? Well, I'll say to my prospective client, so tell me about your finances. And I get really, I feel badly is the right word, when I'll have one of the people come in and that person will say, oh, well, I don't know how much we have in the bank. Well, what banks do you have in that your bunnies are held in? Oh, my husband and my wife does it all. And one of the things I do with my clients is I believe a lawyer should educate. And I'm educating what the law is. Some lawyers will have a 10 or 15-minute consult.
Yeah.
Many, the better ones I think, have a longer one to let people know. And I'm sure you have those kinds of discussions with your people, your clients who are coming in. And I'll ask them, and I'll say, and a lot of times people come to me, what's your plan? Getting divorced tomorrow, last Thursday, or the future? And many are saying, well, I'll learn about the law. And I'll say, well, from this date forward, whether you get divorced or not, why don't you find out your tax return? Why don't you review the tax return before you sign it? And I will say this thing, and maybe you'll hit me for this one, although you're a little far from me. I would say it's more likely that it's been the female who doesn't know the finances. I'm not being sexist, I'm not being gender biased, but I guess the more politically correct way to say it would be the person who is the lower wage earner.
Yes.
So did I say anything offensive the way I produced?
Actually, prior to the show, you were the one that was phrasing it that way, sort of the breadwinner. The person who is the breadwinner is the one that tends to have more power.
Well, I never used the word power. But
I did.
Oh, used, okay.
Yeah, that's my observation in the therapy room. There is more power to decide how much are we spending at Costco, where we might go on vacation, and the other person who's the stay-at-home parent has never assigned a value to that work. And it's interesting, there's another piece of data that tends to show up for that partner. If that partner who's a stay-at-home partner considers ever going back to work, or part-time or full-time, whatever the proposed child care bill always seems to be tacked on to that person. One of the resources I give to my couples is a podcast and a book called Money for Couples by Ramit Sethi.
What's the name again?
Ramit Sethi, S-E-T-H-I. I can't claim credit for coining this, but he says often in this podcast, why is it that the person who's a stay-at-home parent, if they consider going back to work, or part-time or full-time, or even volunteering, why are we taking the child care expenses off of just that person's proposed salary? It's not math. The math is you would combine the higher earner, or formerly known as the breadwinner, with whatever lower rate the person who's going back into the job market. We combine those income, we add up all the expenses for the marriage, including childcare, and it's deducted off of both. I find that very interesting. You were saying a moment ago, the education you do, that's a lost art. In therapy land, we call it psychoeducation. We're giving them tools, we're giving them homework. That type of leadership in a legal session where you're trying to give them a broader guidance is so valuable. And I'm not sure that's happening as much. I don't know why, but it's so needed. People do need guidance.
Well, the reason I do that is because I think it's important to educate your client. And at the end of the day, I get a little bit disturbed when I hear, well, someone comes to me for a second opinion after the divorce is done. Well, why'd you do that? And the client might say, in some cases, well, my lawyer told me to do it.
I've heard that.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I'm not a big fan of my lawyer told me to do it, because I believe that you're educating a client from day one. The minute they came in the door, if they come to see me, they get certain statutes, and I go through them. So that at the end of the day, when it comes down, if your case is one of the 10% of the cases that go to trial or come to decision making, I will hopefully have educated the client enough. I mean, I'm guiding them along the way.
Yeah.
But they understand when can you get alimony, when can you maybe not get alimony.
Yes.
How is property done? So unless you're educating the person, then how can they make an informed decision? That's the way I've always practiced law. But I want to do one more thing that you mentioned. I'm going to tell you a little secret, just between us.
Okay.
Over the last 25 or 30 years, when I've read a case, and we have the Connecticut Law Journal comes out with the appellate court cases and Supreme Court cases, if I find something interesting, I start keeping track of it. Then I started organizing into different topics. It's now about 150 pages long.
Wow.
But the topic I'm going to tell you about is when you talked about the homemaker, there are a couple cases in which specifically judges said being a homemaker has value. And so whenever I would get a client who would say to me, well, Jim, I've never worked or whatever, outside the home, I've raised the kids, whatever, I bring up that case. And when I have a client who's perhaps the breadwinner and they say, well, you know, she never or he never contributed money, I'd say, here's the case.
Wow.
And ironically enough, in the July 2026 Connecticut Law Journal, an appellate court decision, the judge specifically said something to the effect of that the wife, the fact that she stayed home because the husband told her or suggested she do that, well, that should be considered in the analysis, because alimony and those things are gray, not black and white. I tell you this because you and I do different things. I'm an amateur psychologist. All divorce lawyers are.
Yes.
You know, but the smart lawyers, and I try to be smart, is when I have an issue, I refer the case to you to help resolve it. And so when you talk, I want to do a nice segue, hopefully. So how do clients get to you to discuss the issue of the financial impact on my marriage? Like that way I did a nice segue there?
Yes.
How do they come to you because some other person has recommended they come to you on this topic, or in the course of your dealing with a particular person or couple, the topic comes out? How does it, what's the origin?
Thank you for asking. That is a multi-dimensional answer.
Can I get a pat on the back for that?
Yes, I love that. We need the community to know how to access these resources. Now with AI, you mentioned AI, if they put some of these search terms on Chat or Claude, they would probably find me. So if you put yourself into AI, it'll list a few things about you. There's also a website. I do some social media. You and I met with at the Connecticut Council for Non-Adversarial Divorce in trainings. So that is an area where non-adversarial lawyers and mediators and financial people will send clients to me where what they're really arguing about is sometimes their unsolved negative relationship cycle. Sometimes they're arguing about their own money story, and we'll talk in a little while about what are money stories that each of us has. That's our own individual work around money. I'm also a member of the Financial Therapy Association, which is sort of a consortium of, yes, where money is never just money. What a great slide.
Thank you for providing the slide.
That says it all in terms of our presentation. We're getting underneath what money is and how it shows up in relationships where communication is struggling. So in finding me, the Financial Therapy Association, I have a profile on there. I write about, I talk about, I did the training for my peers, and I'm here today talking about it.
I think we met at a session of CC&D, and we were talking about pizza, and you suggested I come to pizza with you, a place I'd never eaten pizza. In fact,
we had pizza.
Today we always have pizza.
We're going to try a different place. I don't know which place, but we're going to have some pizza. We're going to have some lettuce first. I'm going to have some lettuce.
I won't eat lettuce right now. But the thing about the money aspect of issues is very, very important. And you mentioned, before you get into that topic real quickly, is sometimes this discussion of money is an argument people have sort of at the end of the day or the beginning of the day because there might be that last fight. And I have what I call the canoe case. What's a canoe case? In my second divorce case ever, we'd resolved the case on all issues except one last issue came up about who was going to keep the canoe. And both lawyers were very, very frustrated. And even as a very young lawyer, probably like 25 years old at the time, I said to the other lawyer, I said, you know what, this is not about the canoe. This is about somebody wants to have that one last zing perhaps on it. And so that's why I mentioned that topic, but you probably find that sometimes finances are a major thrust and sometimes it's the last possible thrust, or is that not really how you find it?
And something that at least one person is still hanging on to, it's still a connection. If
this is the chart where that was leading to the next chart.
Yes.
And let's leave this up until for a while, directors. But that's the issue. Sometimes it's the big thing, and let's go on. Walk me through.
So how couples find me, someone's making an assumption. Conversations aren't going well around their money. Someone might be having an argument, and an argument can also be shutting down. Most of the times as a couples therapist, we see a lot of triggering happening with arguments, but some people's form of being angry and upset is they just shut down, so they're not talking about money. Agreements. You'll hear me talk a lot when I talk about this topic or any topic with couples in therapy. What are the agreements? And when I ask a couple about what were your agreements about which one of you would stay home with the kids, it's a deer in the headlights. What were your agreements to do this? What were your agreements to do that? There's really not a lot of time. We're not faulting couples or individuals, not at all. Time is the nemesis for all of this. When it comes down, you said at the end of the day, people are putting their heads on the pillow. The couples therapist in me says, have some pillow talk, have some cuddling and canoodling time.
Or how about talking, period?
Well, but that could be the time we're talking about money. That is the worst time to talk about money.
Let's stay on these a little bit more. Let's go
Sure.
a little deeper. On the assumptions issue, is that stating assumptions before you get married, before you get involved, or just along the way?
It reminds me of a book in my waiting room which says it's like 20 questions or whatever that you could ask before you say I do.
50 questions before you, what's that
Yeah.
Simon and Garfunkel song?
Oh,
50 questions.
I don't know that song. But
I will
we
not
have
sing it.
assumptions, and I will, when things go awry, I'll hear a member of the couple say, but I trusted you. And so,
I trusted you, my spouse. ...
I trusted you, or I didn't want to buy the larger house, and you made me do it. I assumed that we had enough here or there. I assumed that you were going to use the inheritance for this. A lot of my clients are most of my clients are really very high functioning people at work, at home, and they're volunteering. So sometimes I will, once I get to know someone, I'll really ask, were you participating in that? And a lot of times they'll either say they're busy, their role was with the kids, or they just said, I trusted. That's more work in the future on what was their money story.
Except I want to throw one more thing. And I've done a couple of shows on coercive control.
Oh, yes.
With Christine
Yes.
Cacciola. Who
That's malignant. That's
Right.
pathological.
Yeah, and
that's really not this.
But I wanted to mention the fact that
Yes.
there are sometimes people are afraid
Yes.
and to ask the question
Yes.
or whatever. But I want to ask about the assumptions.
Well,
Go ahead.
this is really important you mentioned it. One of the ways as therapists, if we work with a couple, we should be monitoring for intimate partner violence or coercive control. I meet with them first together. The next session I meet with each of them individually. There are screeners in there for emotional abuse, coercive control. I will directly ask on many occasions, do you feel safe? And I can also see in the screeners, because some people won't fill some of those things out, but in the individual conversation with me, they'll share it. So we have to make sure we're doing our work to screen in writing and then in person. And I should say all of my work, I would say 99.9% of my work is in person.
Gotta be in person. Body language is so critical. When you talked about assumptions, I wanted to ask this question. I think there's something I read in your materials, because I do my usual prep before a show.
Yes, several preps.
Several preps, that's right. Is that assumptions can change, and when people are getting married at age 25, let's say, 25 and 27, the assumptions they made then, 15 years later, there may be needs to adjust the assumptions. Do you find that sometimes there's a dispute between people in the couples arrangements where, well, wait a minute, when we got married 15 years
Of
ago,
course.
you told me X, now you want to change the rules? Talk to me about that.
A lot of that happens in their own head. There's that existential thing that can happen in midlife where you feel like, I want to get this now, or I want to make sure I purchase this business so I can leave it to our kids. So I'm going to take some money out of the 401k and I'm going to purchase this franchise for them. I may not have told my spouse. My spouse may find out because they see an email or they see, I don't want to say a letter because most of us aren't seeing letters, but a lot of this comes from, again, the inner workings of our relationship with money. In a case where someone might take money out of the 401k to purchase, let's say, a franchise for their kids, they're operating maybe from a place of, when I was growing up or when I was a young adult, my parents didn't give me or I didn't have enough. We call that a version of financial infidelity. We have all these terms now to kind of, those assumptions can really go awry and people can make decisions and kind of go rogue, which then puts them in a category of it's not a sexual or an emotional affair. The person receiving the brunt of those assumptions goes, oh, I thought it would be okay if I did this. It feels the same as an affair.
Automatic orders. In the divorce genre, when someone is going to get divorced and they decide to file for the divorce action, before we had automatic orders, which are probably in the last 10 or 15 years, I forget when it was put in place, and every state's laws are different, we would file a motion to restrain or prohibit or whatever if we thought someone was going to take monies in a joint account, which of course joint accounts, either side could take all the money out if they want, whatever. The court may deal with that harshly later on, but with the banks you can do that. The automatic orders are now in place where once you file for a divorce action in Connecticut, there are limitations as to what can happen to the finances of the parties. And I won't get into that at this point in time, but I raised that because when I have a consult with a client, a potential client who would say to me, well, I'm not ready to get divorced, I just want to learn about it. And then in the course of the consult, I find out that one of the problems is that all of a sudden, let's suppose they had $1 million in the bank, theoretically speaking, that was in both names. Well, Bob, you think it's a problem that all of a sudden now it's $900,000 in his name and only $100,000 in my name, type thing? And so I will say to people, you know, while you're thinking, I never would tell someone to get a divorce. Well, I take that back. If there's physical, terrible abuse like that, I will talk to them about getting a therapist to talk to them about whether they need to file sooner. But I don't tell you to file for divorce, except in an emergency. And I've had a couple like that where I have recommended strongly. Or said, if you don't do it now, don't come back to me.
Right.
Because that's how strong I feel. But when you come to the situation and the finances, I'll say, you know, while you're deciding whether you want to file or not, there's something called the automatic orders. And if you've been unprotected for 15 years, this will help you be protected. And that's where lawyers and therapists can get together, because I've been complimented by a couple of therapists where I sometimes will meet with the therapist and the client.
Excellent.
And there's privilege for the lawyer-client privilege, and there's also the therapist privilege.
Yeah.
And it's important because I want to have the person, maybe I might be a little rough, I don't think I am, but if they have a therapist they've used for a long time, it's easier to talk about these things. Thoughts about that?
Yes, and part of the Financial Therapy Association really speaks of that. Basically, that person might need an advocate to really speak to their attorney. There are many people who feel very intimidated by attorneys. And by the way, some people feel very intimidated by therapists as well. So by bringing the parties together, we do something called like case consultation. All the parties are speaking together. That's a good thing, as long as we have consents, educating people. It's sort of like when you think of the Mayo Clinic or NIH, all the specialists consult. When you go there, you're very sick. There's something where it needs to be investigated, or some serious health issue. So all the providers discuss. That's a great thing. That's sort of putting a circle around those clients of care.
Many years ago, I had a client who had mental health issues and was on some medications. And I decided that before I even took the case, if I were going to take the case, I wanted to meet with the therapist. I think it was a psychiatrist I met with. And the psychiatrist said to me, you know, Bob, essentially I want to say to you, and I had a three-way conversation, the client was on the phone. He said, one of the problems we have is that so-and-so will not take medication. And so I said to him, why does she take the medication, or why does he, whoever it is? And the psychiatrist said, because without it, that person can't really make rational decisions.
Right.
So I said, what's the medication? He told me, it's all confidential. So I told the client in that phone call, I said, I'll tell you what, in your retainer agreement, it's going to say that you will take the medication required by Dr. X, or else I will not be involved in this case. And the person argued with me a little bit and then decided to agree to the clause in the retainer agreement. And the person did take the medicine, and it worked out fine.
Right.
So people might say, gee, you stuck your nose where it didn't belong. I think it belonged there a lot, because if a person needs help, you need the therapist involved. And if the therapist gives you advice, it's not me to say, thou shalt, but in that case, I decided it was necessary. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I trust your decision. I also think that clients who are not adherent to their medication regimen, their level of functioning can plummet. And I think if you're an attorney and you're helping facilitate agreements for them, you don't really know if your client is a good advocate for themselves in that moment. So I think it would be sort of tricky for you to take on a case where your client's functioning is very variable. That's what I think.
Actually, there's a statute that also says that if you're in a divorce case or any kind of divorce case I'll stick on, the statute can require the appointment of a conservator or a guardian ad litem, someone to help that person. So can we go back to the screen, directors, that we had on with the assumptions thing? I want to go through that in more detail. You and I are always getting these wonderful conversations. We could talk for hours.
Absolutely. I sent you something else to talk about earlier.
That's right, for our next
a
show.
Totally different
We're
topic.
2 shows ahead. You were at the argument stage.
Yes, so financial arguments, like any couple who's experiencing a negative cycle, we're going to have periods of flaring and escalating. We're going to have periods of shutting down. What we see a lot in the argument stage is a sense of, I thought I told you. Because couples generally don't have monthly finance meetings, believe it or not, I usually say go to Bagel Man, go to the bagel store if your kids are old enough, and in the morning sit down with your laptop before you have your bagel or have your cup of coffee and start to talk about a 30-minute meeting to prevent these arguments. Because what we're doing is we're building a muscle around communication, around finances. Because as soon as a couple starts talking about money, imagine a tennis ball that's going really fast. First of all, it's not going at all. It's going super slow because they can't really get started doing it, right? And then they start to go and they're communicating and the ball's going back and forth. Now, one person says, well, that's why you bought the deck furniture. We're in this situation because you bought that furniture. All of a sudden, that ball's either going to be dropped and the person will drop their racket and walk away, or the other person will smash the ball. And they'll have to basically defend against. So a lot of what I witness in my office when we ever talk about anything regarding money, quite often I will see that, and I will make the analogy that one of the parts of my job is I'm helping them, I'm replacing myself, get that tennis ball going back and forth, and if one of them needs to place their tennis racket down and say, let's take a beat. I need to take a beat, we need to make a cup of tea, let's make a cup of coffee. Let's go back to this, let's defer this till tomorrow. Money brings up emotion.
Also procrastination.
Of course. And then we have their wonderful kids that are coming in the room, needing something. By the time people have kids, even if they have 2 nannies, I've worked the gamut of different clients and socioeconomic status, and these conversations almost never happen.
It's interesting. We have in the court system in Connecticut a special master's program. What's a special master's program? Experienced lawyers like myself volunteer every quarter, so maybe 3-4 times a year, it's a male-female team, and cases that are not resolved that may be facing trial, we will, for free, we will volunteer our time. It's usually an hour and a half format, and we'll give our time for free to help resolve the case. And we'll have both lawyers and both parties involved, and it's good for me because someday I'll need the special master to help me out.
Right.
I did one a couple of years ago, and there was an issue about money, of course, that's one important part of it. And we have a thing in Connecticut called educational support, which means that the courts can now order, under the statute that passed several years ago, it used to be that if one party wanted to resolve college education or vocational school education, unless both parties agreed to do it, the court couldn't order it. Now the court can order it, the judge can order it.
That's great.
And so we were doing the special master's program trying to help people resolve the case, and we're talking about college education, and the parties are saying, well, we'll defer it, and you can, under the law in Connecticut, say we won't resolve it now, we'll resolve it in the later dates, because later you have a 5- and 6-year-old kid, you don't need to worry about college education or educational support for 12 years from now, and things may change. But we had this case in which there was a child who was going to go into college the following semester. And so I said, by the way, you say you'll waive educational support. What are you going to do about next semester, the first semester of the? Well, so we use our own discretion, the other master and I, and said, look, here's what's going to happen for next semester. We won't deal with the future part, but you can't have your child. It was probably, let's say, May or June, April, May or June, when the discussion was happening. You're going to have your check due in a few months, and so we suggested that. In that case, we suggest when you sell the house next month, which they're going to do, let's take a little money off the top. You said the retirement account. In this case, we said off the top, let's put X dollars for the first semester so you don't have your child freaking out.
Thank you.
Think about, you're welcome.
Thank you.
You're talking about what you, husband, not you and me, but if we were married, we're having our disputes, whatever. But the child who's getting ready to go to college, well, how am I going to go to wherever I'm going to go to school, whether it be whatever?
You're so right. On top of trying to process at that age your parents divorcing, and whether you have young siblings at home that you might be worried about leaving, which is tough to leave if you know they're unhappy and things have not been good. I really want to say that you taking the time to do that was essential. They needed that guidance.
Which leads us to transparency. Aren't I pretty good at the transition thing?
Yes, yes.
Transparency, what's that all
So
about?
transparency, remember, couples don't generally have agreements on the amounts they would spend on certain items. So imagine finding things through, a notification from your bank or going on your partner's phone. People sometimes feel like they have a right to their privacy around money. I meet a variety of couples, some of which at this point do not have a common checking account together. So if you don't share money with your partner, you don't have a checking account together, they're operating in general on I can do what I want as long as you take care of the phone bill, you take care of the mortgage, you take care of the taxes. It doesn't work. We tend to see that with couples who are divorced once, twice, 3 times, but I also see it with couples on their first marriage. So it can create sort of you're in a vacuum and you can do what you want. So then I'm relying on you to do the right thing. And so being transparent, being clear around money, it's the way to go.
And just to be clear, you're not saying that every single expenditure needs to be okayed every week,
No.
whatever. What you're talking more about is when the credit card bill comes in, you might want to share it with the other spouse. Or if you're going to make a major expenditure, you might want to share that and have a theme,
Yeah.
right? You're talking about more of a theme of what we're going to spend, even
Yeah.
a budget. Could you clarify
Also
that a
sharing
little
the
bit?
positives. I just got a bonus today. I'm doing so great. Our account is up. Sharing and celebrating around money, creating a variety of emotions around money. And that also creates teamwork. We haven't talked about, if I'm working with couples, we want couples, even in divorce, being a team. And if I meet a couple in discernment counseling where one really does want to take the path toward divorce, in a few cases I've worked with a couple to plan for when they could divorce. They were not, and not from a financial, but the emotions and behaviors around money, being a team. They didn't have enough finances to divorce. Imagine that. Creating a team with people to be able to figure out how to live where they are now, create enough independence within that structure, and begin to build a better financial life so they could separate their lives eventually.
Isn't it a shame that people stay married, for example, or stay together just because of economics? It's cheaper to have one house versus 2, or one rental versus 2. So it's kind of sad. How do you deal with people who you meet in your clients as their therapists and you're meeting with one person? Sometimes it's couples, sometimes it's just one party, correct?
Yeah.
And we'll talk about how you distinguish what you're going to do. But if you have someone say, well, let's suppose you're seeing the client as your own individual client, not the couple, and he's saying the only reason I'm staying there is because it's too expensive to get divorced. How do you handle that? What do you tell the person about that, especially if there's 2 or 3 kids involved? Well, you're just staying married for financial reasons.
Well, first we have to meet them where they are. That's our first job as a therapist. We also have to eventually, once we have therapeutic rapport, gently challenge.
Gently.
At first, gently challenge. What we know of those relationships is they generally don't last. Someone needs emotional support, someone needs physical connection. So staying in a marriage like that, on paper it sounds great. Those are generally short-term situations, Bob, where let's say someone has to finish a degree or they're finishing a training program and they say, this isn't the right time for me to divorce because I need to finish this. That's a little different. But extended or waiting for the youngest child to go to college, I have not seen those things pan out. I've worked with people who really thought, when I worked with individual clients as well, that their partner would never ask them for a divorce. They're not organized enough, they're too focused on the kids. Wouldn't you know it, their partner did. Everyone needs to feel connected, and prolonged disconnection is generally not well supported with couples.
And you talk about transparency. I mean, if you and I just told about our stories, and we could always do it in a general way, we can't tell about clients' confidences, but in general, we could go on for hours and hours. I was involved in a case many years ago in which my client was saying to me, she spends too much money on clothes. Okay, I don't know if I've had too many cases in my career where if it was a man, he didn't say she spent too much money on clothes, and the lady might say he drinks too much beer or whatever. But so this guy says that she spends too much money in clothes, and we were doing a deposition, which is a legal process, as you know, pre-trial process where you ask questions under oath, and it's a way of getting the facts together so that you're ready for trial if you have a trial. And he wanted to talk about that, so I said, well, I guess we'll have to ask her about her clothing expenditures. So I went through that. I said, but she might go through and critique your expenditures. It's not going to happen. So I go through that, and after we finished her deposition, my client said, gee, you did a really good job. Thank you very much. I said, but wait, you got to ask for your questions. And so in the first 15 minutes, the opposing counsel, who was a good lawyer also, said, what's this bill for XYZ wine company? And he said, oh, that's where I get my wine. And how often do you have that bill? Oh, every so often. So the other attorney puts on the table, what's this? Let me show you this credit card bill for the last 4 months. Oh yeah, I did it 4 months, and every month that. And how much was the wine bill? X dollars. And he said, well, you said your wife spends too much on clothes, you spend too much on wine. They're the same exact numbers, more or less.
Yeah.
And so that's where the transparency comes in, and that's where you, as a therapist, and me as a lawyer, can say, wait a minute, do you want to raise?
Right.
You know?
And if I'm working with a couple and their goal is couples therapy, if one is talking about how much someone spends on Amazon deliveries, what's good for one is good for the other because they're in couples therapy. So I do have to also introduce that. And is it difficult? Because especially if it's a financial infidelity case, because I'm working with the couple is the client, and each member of the couple is 50% of my client. So in this case, in couples therapy, that would be part of our work. It wouldn't be one client creating a situation where the other person is sort of the patient because, they blew past the budget. What's good for one is good for the marriage.
Like that, right? Every couple has too many stories.
Yes, and this is so important. I wish all of us learned this in high school or even younger. So we have 2 different prototypes here. We have one member of the couple where they had education around money, maybe planning. I spoke to someone yesterday who one of the parents set up an IRA for their child who was adult child going into college. And I said, wow, did you know that very few kids have an IRA going into school? It was unbelievable. So we have that person who you're coming from a family where you can talk about money, you were educated about money, and then you have a family who said, you know what, we have enough in the checking account, let's do it. Or, you know what, let's charge it, we deserve it. Or, no, we can't have that, we don't have enough. And constantly denying themselves anything that was sort of special. So imagine this couple married. That's what I want you to see. They're in my therapy room. They show up. Imagine the decisions about where to live, how to live, how many kids to have, where do they go to school, will we ever have a vacation? This person is sometimes a little irresponsible with money. This person is sometimes the parent.
Let me ask this question then. I mentioned before that, do you see the client individually, the husband or the wife, or do you see them as couples? Do you typically, in your practice, do it only with couples, both sides?
So with the couple, so I see couples, so my specialty is with the whole relationship.
The crucible, okay.
They come in together first, and then I'll do one individual session in the beginning of our work, sort of like a 90-minute session, and then from then on it's together. So my whole role is looking at the dynamic that each of them co-creates. Now remember, for certain negative dynamics, not everyone has the same equal role. And as therapists, as financial therapists, we're not quantifying, you had 60%, you had 40%. We're really trying to create a system where each of them can hold up the mirror for themselves.
So your approach, and many therapists just do the husband or the wife, whatever, you will do it primarily with both couples.
Yes.
Both parties in the
Yes.
couple. Talk to me about the keeping up with the Joneses. I live in Richfield, which has
That's where my practice is as well.
Okay, I live in Richfield, and people, by the way, stereotype Richfield that everyone in Richfield is rich, everybody in Westport's rich, everybody in Granite. That's not the case.
Right.
We all know that, but people have these stereotypes. But so therefore, in some towns, Lower Fairfield County, for example, the next door neighbor has a brand new car every year.
Yeah.
And this neighbor can't afford that.
Yeah.
Do you have discussion with clients about, let's say maybe the husband or the wife, I got to buy that new car to keep up with the Joneses, but the wife might say, well, wait a minute, we already have $100,000 on our credit card, we can't do that. How do you deal with those kinds of issues?
Well, sometimes they're coming in because their lifestyle, they've really blown up their lifestyle. And so every month they're sort of leaking. Every time the monthly mortgage rolls around, and that's part of what's bringing them in. I see a lot of the extracurriculars for the kids and decisions around, should we do horseback riding, ice skating, hockey, private cheerleading lessons, or math or chess. I see a lot of talking about that. So how do I handle that? I talk about, well, what is reasonable? When I went to school, here's how when I went to school, it was considered enrichment. We have to be careful on what is enrichment and what is basically the parents working for the kids. So, and I'll explore with them. I don't look at my scenario in my history. I want to explore what are your ideas about how kids should spend time. And I'll ask the other partner. The other time I see disagreements are when it comes to college. The keeping up with the Joneses has gotten berserk. The finances around college have gotten to the point, from my perspective, where, and the schools, we all want our kids to go to the top schools. There's some kids that really can't afford to take those loans out. They're going to be buried with those loans. And again, I'm not a financial provider. I don't talk about math. Please don't send me spreadsheets. I talk to each member of the couple. One member might have gone to public universities and be doing great. The other one really wants a private or Ivy League or study abroad program that the family can't afford. There's several more children down the line.
There's a trend more and more, people are being smart, where a child could get into any great school he wanted to get into, but the parents just couldn't really afford it. And so some people are having the kids go to a junior college for a year or two,
Yeah.
and then transferring to another school, because the question becomes, where are you going to spend your money, especially now where the job market for kids out of school isn't so great. But the topic that we're talking about is having the parents be transparent,
Yes.
and talking to each other about what can we afford.
And I want to bring you to the emotion of that conversation. Imagine you're saying that we can't give our kids the launching that they need? I never knew you were this kind of person. Imagine that.
I asked you 10 years ago to go back to work. The kids are now in school.
Yes.
We didn't play in this role playing, but we are doing role playing. I asked you, Kelley, to go back to work and make some money so you could put it. And you said no, I couldn't. But the kids were old enough to be home after school, and you wouldn't do it. So they have all the shit,
Yes.
all the stuff comes out. Almost
Yes.
said the wrong
Yes,
word.
it's the idea. Parents love their kids, so that passion is coming because they love their kids, and we all now want to give our kids everything, and there's also a balance of earning and modifying. We went from here to here, so we're trying to help couples find their middle ground, and there's a lot of emotions about what our hopes are for kids. So the keeping up with the Joneses, I see those two areas primarily.
We only have a few minutes left. I want
Yes.
to connect to the following, and we're going to have you back another show or two, if you'll come on.
I would love to.
Raise your right hand, please. Thank you. At what stage do you think about having, let's suppose you have a high school junior or senior, and the parents are discussing the college thing. Do you ever think about suggesting to the parents that they have the child come in for a session with you to talk about candidly giving transparency as to the child, understanding mom and dad really want to let you go to Harvard? I'm a Yale guy, undergraduate, but let's say Harvard, that's cost you, what, $90,000 a year, although some of the schools now give free tuition if you're at certain levels.
Right.
But let's suppose your parent has to pay for it. Do you ever think about suggesting to the parties that bring your child in once so you can have an open discussion, mom and dad to the child, explaining? Do you ever do that kind of thing?
So in the past, I did do that before specializing just to couples. Nowadays, many of those teens have an individual therapist. That could be a route where the parents come in and there's like a parent education session. That could be a route, or I would recommend a family therapist. I'm really careful about my role. So my role is the couples therapist. So bringing in their child might be a bit out of my role. I would help prepare them for that conversation.
By the way, I agree with you 100%. I was asking you as a setup question, but that's
good.
what I would do. I'm going to let you.
I passed.
You passed always. In our wrap-up session, give me 20 seconds, any major thought you have before you go.
Today, for the community, just being exposed to these ideas about money and kind of taking your own internal temperature about how you feel when you're dealing with money. Do you spend any time during your day talking about money? Do you update your partner or check in with them or try to create parameters? Or do you also try to encourage some splurging once in a while? I want people to be more conscious and present about their emotions and behaviors around money.
Communication, that's the key. Kelley, thank you so very much. You're wonderful. We have a lot of fun together, and we are getting pizza after, and we have discussed in advance what the topping will be, so we're okay. This has been Bob Potsner on The Bobby O Show with the wonderful Kelley Hopkins-Alvarez. Thank you.
Thank you.